Hey guys, tonight we slip into marble seats still warm from the sun. The kind of polished stone that makes your spine ache and your heart beat a little faster, because the air is alive with dust, sweat, and the scent of roasted nuts being hawked by boys darting between rows. You're pressed shoulder to shoulder with senators in snow-white togas and merchants jangling with coins. And yet your eyes keep sliding down to the sand where muscle, leather, and steel glint beneath the midday blaze. You're not here to cheer for the Empire's glory, not really. You're here to watch a particular kind of theater. Women whose jewels could buy 10 villas leaning just far enough forward that the gladiators below can catch the angle of their gaze. It's a dangerous game, this exchange of glances, a currency of risk and desire, and you probably wouldn't survive one night in their sandals. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. I love knowing whose midnight is about to get stranger. Now dim the lights, maybe turn out a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The sand is raked smooth, and the trumpet blasts split the sky. But your attention keeps snagging on one woman in particular. Pearls coiled in her hair like moons, her neck glistening with perfumed oil. Her husband, a man with eyebrows like thunderclouds, mutters about taxes beside her, but she doesn't hear him. Her gaze is locked on the gate as it creaks open, and a pair of gladiators stride out, shields gleaming, scars bright against their skin. It's almost funny, the contrast, this woman draped in silk and saffron, that man dripping in sweat and iron. Yet there's a charge in the air, sharper than the roar of the crowd, as if every forbidden thought is visible in the dust motes. Dancing between them, you've read about Rome's wealth, about villas with fountains that spat wine, about couches inlaid with ivory where people reclined while servants peeled grapes. But here's the secret part the guidebooks skip. Sometimes, in the echo of those villas, the real entertainment wasn't the music or the poetry. It was the memory of that one gladiator's smile, or the thought that maybe, just maybe, he had seen her wink as the crowd screamed for blood. Historians still argue whether these liaisons were rare exceptions or a widespread sport of the upper class. But the gossip carved into Pompeii's walls says enough hearts and names scratched with crude tools, confessions too impatient to wait for parchment. And speaking of parchment, Eleanor Herman once described in Sex with Kings how women across centuries played at danger through affairs with men beneath their rank, but Rome's matrons perfected it. Imagine passing a gladiator a ribbon scented with your favorite oil, a scrap he could hide under his armor, pressed against his chest as he fought lions. That ribbon wasn't just cloth. It was a dare, a joke, a promise of laughter later in some hidden alcove if fortune spared him. You can almost smell the jasmine, can't you? Sharp enough to cut through iron and blood. But don't mistake this for pure romance. Foucault would nudge you in the ribs and remind you that sexuality in Rome was tangled with power, that every flirtation was also a contest of dominance and display. Was she conquering him with her wealth, or was his raw danger a rebellion against her gilded cage? Scholars still debate which way the balance tipped, but the tension itself was the thrill. There's even a fringe tidbit that makes you smile. Some gladiators supposedly rubbed themselves with oil mixed with ground herbs, claiming it made them irresistible, like ancient cologne. You picture the scene of fighters slicking on that potion, half believing in magic, half just hoping some patrician woman in the stands might notice. You want to laugh, but you know modern cologne commercials aren't that different. Meanwhile, the woman with the pearls shifts in her seat, fanning herself though the breeze is cool. The gladiator below meets her eyes for just a second longer than is safe. It's nothing. It's everything. Somewhere in the back rows, a scribe is already preparing to spread the rumor like wildfire. And you realize this isn't about love or lust at all. It's about the thrill of standing one toe over the line society has drawn, knowing you might fall, but savoring the wobble on the edge. The roar of the crowd hasn't even faded when the real game begins. Quieter, slyer, hidden in gestures so small you'd miss them if you weren't paying attention. You spot the matrons, leaning back on their cushions, their fingers brushing the rims of their jeweled cups in coded rhythms. Little taps that mean everything to the gladiators watching from below. Rome loved spectacle, but its richest women loved secrets more. And tonight those secrets are written in the fold of a cloak or the flutter of a handkerchief. You can almost taste the honeyed wine in the air as one woman, bangles clinking like soft thunder, lifts her cup and lets a ribbon slide from her sleeve, pale silk laced with rose oil. It tumbles into the basket of figs a servant is carrying, a basket destined for the gladiator barracks. You know what's really being delivered isn't fruit, it's an invitation, sweetened and perfumed, tucked between bruised skins. A story Eleanor Herman shared in Sex with Kings, about a queen centuries later who passed her lover folded scraps inside books of poetry, the words carrying more heat than the fire in the hearth. But Rome did it first. The matrons here don't write poems. They write with scents and colors, crimson ribbons for passion, blue for longing, gold for daring. Imagine a fighter bruised and exhausted, opening a fig to find a glint of silk, holding it up to his face, and inhaling the perfume of a woman he'll only see from a balcony. You almost laugh at the ridiculousness of it, and yet it works, doesn't it? Because sometimes risk is sweeter than the fruit itself. Historians still argue whether these secret exchanges were tolerated by husbands who saw them as harmless theater, or punished harshly if exposed. Some records hint that powerful men turned blind eyes, amused at the antics, while others suggest exiles and forced divorces shadowed such affairs. And here you are, leaning forward in your seat, feeling the weight of that uncertainty, knowing one gesture could end in laughter or in ruin. You picture one gladiator, nicknamed Achilles for his golden hair, who became the whispered obsession of a senator's wife. According to Peter Webb in The Erotic Spirit Through History, she sent him a necklace hidden in a loaf of bread, a trinket too fine to be ignored. When he wore it into the arena, the crowd gasped, recognizing it, and for days afterward graffiti bloomed across the city walls. Achilles loves Claudia. It was both a love note and a death sentence, and yet the thrill kept her writing. You smirk at the thought ancient Rome, inventors of the first fan fiction, scribbled in public bathrooms. A fringe tidbit makes you grin even more. Some wealthy women supposedly trained pet birds, little parrots or ravens, to squawk gladiators, names as if taunting their rivals. Imagine sipping wine while your pet croaks, "Marcus! Marcus!" across the atrium, and everyone pretending they don't understand. It's so absurd you want to roll your eyes, but it's also exactly the kind of reckless fun that makes sense in a world where rules are both rigid and endlessly bendable. Foucault would whisper that all this was less about passion and more about performance, about women flexing power in a society that locked them in silk cages. Was sending a ribbon to a fighter truly about desire? Or was it a cheeky rebellion, a way to remind Rome's men that women still played the game too? You can't help but agree, at least partly, because every coded letter was also a spark in a society built on appearances. The gladiators knew their role. They weren't just fighters. They were fantasy incarnate, the living embodiment of danger with a dash of forbiddance allure. To be the chosen recipient of a matron's gift was both flattering and perilous. One night of indulgence could earn a man a pouch of gold or a dagger in the dark courtesy of her husband's slaves. Still, they took the risk, because who could resist the perfume, the laughter, the promise whispered between barred windows? You imagine the adrenaline of stepping into the sand with not only death, but love waiting in the stands, and you almost feel sorry for them, except part of you thinks they must have enjoyed every second. The night deepens and the games wind down, but the real drama has only begun. Servants carry baskets out of the amphitheater, their arms heavy with figs, wine, and hidden messages. And you know tomorrow's gossip will be spicier than any stew simmering in Rome's kitchens. Somewhere in a cramped barracks smelling of sweat and oil, a gladiator will unwrap silk from a bruised fig and grin, while across the city, a matron will recline in her marble villa, waiting for a rumor, a look, anything to prove her gesture was received. It's reckless, it's ridiculous, and yet you can't stop leaning forward, because the air itself feels perfumed with conspiracy. The steam wraps around you like a damp cloak as you step into the bathhouse, a place where marble walls echo with laughter, gossip, and the faint slap of sandals on whetstone. The air smells of lavender oil, spiced wine, and just a hint of mildew rising from the pools. But nobody cares because the mood is easy, indulgent, and deliciously careless. Rich Roman women sink into warm water until their jeweled hairpins glimmer. Like fish scales, their voices low but their eyes sharp as they measure who's looking at whom, who's whispering too closely, who's blushing just a little too much. Here, in the mist, flirtation feels safer, hidden under layers of steam and chatter. But you know every word could ripple beyond these walls, slipping into rumor before the water even cools. You watch as a matron leans close to her friend, her hand drifting across the surface as if idly, but her eyes dart to the doorway where a gladiator lingers, summoned under the pretext of delivering jars of oil. He's more spectacle than servant, stripped to a linen loincloth, his muscles slick with the same oil he pretends to carry. The women titter, not bothering to hide it, and the steam curls around their laughter like a conspirator. One story from Eleanor, Herman's sex with kings, fits neatly here. About how royal mistresses in later centuries often arranged meetings under the guise of bathing rituals, claiming that a man was merely assisting with oils or massage. Rome, of course, had already laid the blueprint. A senator's wife was said to have summoned her favorite gladiator to rub her shoulders with myrrh after a long soak, insisting to her attendants that it was merely therapeutic. Was it? You suspect everyone in the room knew better, but nobody dared to break the illusion. The gladiator's hand slid over her skin, strong enough to snap her bones, but gentle enough to make her shiver, and the moment blurred the line between healer and lover. Historians still argue whether such encounters were tolerated as harmless indulgences or condemned as scandal. But the fact that so many stories survived suggests that something real smoldered beneath the steam. You can't help grinning at a fringe tidbit that floats through your mind. Some Romans believed certain oils enhanced beauty when absorbed through the skin, including mixtures of saffron, donkey's milk, and even powdered pearls. Imagine reclining while a gladiator rubbed you down with something that smelled like a bakery exploded, pretending it was for health. It sounds absurd, and yet you know modern spas aren't much different slathering strangers in chocolate. Or wine while charging a fortune. The bathhouse, you realize, was less about cleanliness and more about theater, every touch a scene. Every scent a Q da Foucault would murmur in your ear that sexuality here wasn't simply about bodies, it was about visibility and invisibility, about being seen enough to excite, but not so much that it endangered. These women performed intimacy in shadows of steam, crafting a balance between secrecy and display. You notice how one matron adjusts her robe just loosely enough to reveal a glimpse of thigh as she steps from the pool, knowing full well the gladiator at the door will glance. She pretends not to notice, but you know she's counting heartbeats, measuring the risk like a gambler rolling dice. The gladiators, for their part, played along. They poured oil too slowly, fingers brushing wrists longer than necessary, or let their eyes linger with just enough heat to leave a mark that no one could quite call evidence. For them, the bathhouse was another arena, one where the stakes were higher than blood. Here, the prize was the favor of women who could protect them, pay them, or destroy them with a single whisper. You imagine the tension in their chests, the way their hearts hammered louder than the slap of water against marble, and you almost envy them that rush. There's a tale Peter Webb once shared of a matron who arranged her flirtations through bathhouse. Gossip, spreading the word among her friends that she was interested in stronger oils. Everyone knew what she meant, and soon her chosen gladiator was conveniently present with the very jar she had requested. The jars, of course, became symbols, exchanged like love letters, each fragrance carrying a new layer of daring. When he appeared with frankincense, it wasn't just fragrance, it was a declaration that he had heard her call. Meanwhile, the bathhouse slaves, silent as shadows, carried the gossip outward. They whispered in markets, in kitchens, in the very villas where husbands plotted their politics, and by the time night fell, the city hummed with rumors. Was she really massaged with oil until she sighed like that? Did the gladiator kiss her? Shoulder, or was it merely steam playing tricks? Nobody knew, and everyone pretended to know. That was the fun of it, the space between certainty and imagination. The spark that kept Rome buzzing like a hive dot as you sit in the corner, half hidden. By mist, you realize the bathhouse wasn't just a place to bathe. It was a stage, and every bead of oil glistening on a gladiator's hand was another line in a play too scandalous to write, but too thrilling to resist. And when the women finally rose, their robes clinging damp to their bodies, their laughter lingering in the marble arches, you could almost hear the city itself leaning closer, waiting to see who would be bold enough to step back into the steam tomorrow. The torches flicker against painted walls as you enter a dining room, where couches sprawl in a horseshoe and the smell of roasted lamb and honeyed dates clings to the air, thick enough to taste. You sink into cushions softer than sign itself, surrounded by chatter and the clink of silver cups. But your eyes go immediately to the gladiators standing at the far wall, dressed not in armor but in tunics cut too short, their presence explained. Away as entertainment, yet everyone here knows exactly why they're invited. The matrons recline with lazy grace, their sandals kicked off, jeweled toes peeking from embroidered robes, and their laughter rises like smoke when the fighters step forward to pour wine. One matron, cheeks flushed, eyes sharp as daggers, lets her fingers trail just a moment too long along the gladiator's wrist as he fills her cup. A gesture that makes her husband shift uneasily, but say nothing because the room is crowded. The politics delicate, and everyone is pretending this is perfectly respectable. You feel the thrill coil tighter, because every gesture is balanced on the knife edge between joke and scandal. Desire and disaster. Eleanor Herman wrote in Sex with Kings about how powerful women used dinner parties as veiled opportunities to toy with forbidden lovers, and Rome excelled at this theater of risk. Imagine a senator's wife daring a gladiator to taste her cup to prove it wasn't poisoned. Watching his lips press against the same rim hers had touched, the exchange scandalous, enough to make the entire table burn with envy. You can practically hear the whispers already. Was it just wine, or something far stronger passing between them? Historians still argue whether such dares were playful games or genuine invitations, but the ambiguity is the point. It allows the matron to laugh off the rumors if they reach her husband's ears. While savoring the fire they spark, Peter Webb once described an evening where a Ramang hostess brought gladiators into her villa disguised as musicians, their instruments little more than props, while they played the real symphony in stolen touches and glances. You can see it now, the strum of a lyre badly faked, the women laughing not at the music, but at the joke. Every note a cover for a secret far more intoxicating. One woman dares to slip a grape into a gladiator's mouth, a gesture so intimate you almost choke on your own wine just watching it. And the air thickens as though the gods themselves lean closer to watch. The quirky tidbit that makes you grin is that some aristocrats employed professional flirters, men paid not for sex but for the art of witty banter at these feasts. Imagine being hired just to tease a matron with double entendres while her gladiator lover watched from the shadows, jealousy sharpening his smile. It's absurd, yes, but in a city where even pet monkeys were jewelry, nothing was too extravagant. For pleasure, And of course, Foucault would remind you that these banquets weren't simply indulgence. They were stages for power plays, for women to push against the marble walls of patriarchy with laughter disguised as innocence. Every risk joke at the table was a rebellion veiled in silk, a way of saying, I may recline here, but I'm no less dangerous than the men I watch fight lions. The games grew bolder as the wine flowed. A matron challenges a gladiator to wrestle. One of her guests, and when he pins the man with effortless grace, she claps like a girl, her laughter bubbling over as she leans forward to crown him with a garland of ivy. It's harmless fun, or so it seems, until you notice how her hand lingers in his hair a moment too long, her ring catching the torchlight. The room gasps, then erupts in laughter, because nobody dares name what they've just witnessed, but everyone will repeat it tomorrow in whispers. The gladiator bows, his eyes never leaving hers, and you can feel the crackle of something dangerous in the air. You remember the bathhouse steam and the silken ribbons hidden in figs, and you realize, this is the next level, the flirtation not hidden in shadows but flaunted under chandeliers, daring the world to notice. The matron with the ivy crown leans back, sipping her wine, her lips stained red, and for one dizzying moment, you believe she could topple an empire with nothing more than a laugh. That's the hook, isn't it? The thrill of watching women play, with fire so openly that the whole city pretends not to smell the smoke. And you, caught between amusement and awe, know you'd never survive a Roman dinner party, not with your secrets intact. The night stretches long, but you find yourself wandering away from the clamor of dining rooms and torches, slipping instead into the hushed cool of a villa garden where the air tastes of rosemary and damp earth. Moonlight paints the marble path silver, and fountains murmur like confidants who promise not to repeat what they've heard. You walk beneath arched trellises heavy with grapes, and it's here away from the crowded banquets that the real daring begins. A rustle in the hedges reveals two figures, a matron draped in gauzy linen and a gladiator whose shadow cuts sharp angles across the gravel. They move like dancers, cautious yet charged, each step a gamble, each laugh muffled as though the garden itself is holding its breath. You can almost hear her sandals sliding against the path as she tiptoes out past the mosaics, leaving behind her silk cushions for the chance to taste danger under the open sky. One tale Eleanor Herman, recorded in Sex with Kings, describes as scenes. Queens slipping into gardens at night to meet a lover disguised as a guard. The risk electrifying because every whisper of wind might have been a spy's footstep. Rome, too, played out its games under cypress and olive trees, where a matron might walk for air, only to stumble into the arms of the fighter she had been eyeing all evening. Imagine the thrill, perfume mixing with the sharp tang of iron, jewels brushing against rough linen, the world of luxury colliding with the grit of survival. You can almost smell the crushed herbs underfoot, sharp and intoxicating, a scent that would cling to her robe when she returned, forcing her slaves to bite their tongues to silence. Historians still argue whether these midnight encounters were frequent or merely whispered fantasies, but the graffiti scrawled on garden walls hints at truths too inconvenient for polite history. Some scrawls even pair women's names with those of gladiators, as though the garden paths themselves were pages in a secret diary. You picture a husband discovering such marks and raging, yet powerless to erase them all, while the city chuckled in the shadows. A fringe tidbit that makes you smirk. Some Romans believed moonlight itself was an aphrodisiac, claiming that women who walked beneath it too long would grow restless with desire. It sounds ridiculous, and yet you glance up at the full silver disc and wonder whether the matrons believed it too, or simply used it as an excuse to slip outside when the villa grew stifling. Perhaps they whispered, "I need moonlight for my health," before vanishing into hedges where laughter betrayed them. You can't help but joke that it was the world's first doctor's note for sneaking out. The gladiators, too, understood the stakes. They were bound by chains of status, Yet gardens gave them temporary freedom, a chance to meet their admirers as men, not fighters. One might place a hand against the cold bark of a cypress to steady himself as she leaned closer, her voice trembling between fear and hunger. For him, it wasn't just flirtation. It was survival sweetened with adrenaline, because her favor could buy him luxuries or even freedom if handled wisely. Yet it was also peril, because discovery could mean his execution. That knowledge made every touch sharper, every laugh brighter, every stolen kiss burn hotter than the sun itself. Foucault's voice murmurs again, reminding you that this was never only about love, it was about bending power in the dark. About women who were supposed to be ornamental finding ways to play queens in their own secret kingdoms. The garden paths became courts, the gladiators. Their subjects, and each tryst a tiny rebellion against marble walls built to confine them. You see it now, a matron trailing her hand along a hedge as though she owns the night, daring anyone to challenge her. Peter Webb tells of one story where a gladiator supposedly carved his lover's initials into the bark of a laurel tree, a symbol that outlasted their affair. The tree stood for years, its scarred surface a silent witness, until the villa was abandoned and weeds claimed the fountain. You can almost touch that bark now, rough beneath your fingers, a reminder that passion leaves marks even when people try to erase it. The garden around you hums with insects and secrets, and you realize it's not just a backdrop, but a character itself, sheltering laughter, swallowing sighs, and betraying lovers with crushed petals underfoot. By the time dawn begins to pink the horizon, the matrons slip back inside, their hair damp with dew, their sandals streaked with dirt, their eyes brighter than any gemstone in their hair. And you know as they recline once more on ivory couches, their husbands none the wiser, that Rome's real theater wasn't only in the arena or the forum, it was here, in the shadows of cypress and vine, where danger kissed luxury under a watchful moon dot. By the time the sun climbs again, the city is already buzzing, and you feel it in the markets where fishmongers shout and sandal straps slap against the stones. But beneath the smell of olives and garlic lingers something sharper, the spice of gossip, carried faster than the Tiber's current. Rome thrived on spectacle, and when matrons flirted with gladiators, every servant, every scribe, every bored teenager with a wax tablet became part of the network that turned glances into legend. You overhear whispers spilling from a baker's stall. She passed him a ribbon last night. One woman says as she kneads dough, and another replies, no, it was a necklace hidden in a fig. You know the truth doesn't matter. The rumor itself is the entertainment, embroidered with each retelling until it sparkles brighter than reality. You almost laugh because it sounds exactly like a modern celebrity tabloid, only scratched into plaster instead of printed on glossy pages. Take for instance the story Eleanor Herman recalled in Sex with Kings, of a mistress who was mocked in pamphlets for letting her lover wear her jewels. Rome did the same centuries earlier, only with graffiti and whispers. Imagine strolling down a street in Pompeii and spotting crude drawings of a matron and her gladiator etched beside a tavern door, the kind of permanent gossip you couldn't scrub away. Historians still argue whether these graffiti were meant as satire, threats, or genuine fan devotion, but the sheer number suggests Rome's fascination was endless. The gladiators became celebrities, and the women who adored them became characters in an ongoing soap opera the whole city claimed to know. One quirky tidbit you stumble across makes you grin. Vendors supposedly sold little clay figurines shaped like gladiators with exaggerated muscles, souvenirs for fans who wanted to bring home their favorites. You picture a matron's slave buying one for the household shrine, but really tucking it into her mistress's chamber, a secret idol of flesh disguised as a trinket. And if anyone asked, she could laugh and claim it was just a child's toy. The plausibility makes it funnier, as though Rome had invented action figures centuries too early. Of course, the gossip cut both ways. Gladiators who basked in matronly attention risked becoming targets of ridicule, painted as playthings instead of warriors. Foucault would remind you that the discourse wasn't neutral. Sexuality was always entangled with shame and power, and the very rumors that glorified them could also undermine their authority in the arena. Imagine a fighter stepping into combat, the crowd chanting not his battle name, but the whispered nickname of his lover. Affection turned into mockery sharp enough to wound pride more deeply than steel. Peter Webb told of one case where a woman's affair with a gladiator was sung in bawdy songs, repeated at taverns until the lyrics outlived the lovers themselves. You can hear the melody in your head, a crude chorus shouted by drunkards, while respectable citizens pretended to scowl but secretly tapped their feet. The city itself seemed addicted to these tales, unable to resist transforming private glances into public theater. And the more people laughed, the more the women leaned into the game, daring each other with riskier gestures, knowing that notoriety itself was intoxicating. You notice how the servants played their part, leaking information for coins or amusement, carrying tales between households until even senators in the forum knew which matron had blushed too much at dinner. Gossip became currency, traded like spices, each story adding another layer of danger. A woman's reputation might crumble under the weight of one rumor, yet paradoxically, the thrill of walking that line was what made the flirtation irresistible. It was as if scandal itself became the gladiator everyone wanted to wrestle with. And in the middle of this whirlwind, the gladiators themselves became walking billboards of desire and danger. Their scars were painted in words, their smiles carved into walls, their lovers' names scrawled beside theirs like signatures. You imagine them strutting through the marketplace, half embarrassed and half delighted, aware that every glance they received was charged with both admiration and suspicion. Some must have loved it, basking in the fame. Others surely dreaded the next whisper that might cost them their lives. As you drift along these alleys filled with chatter, you realize Rome itself was the ultimate voyeur, a city incapable of silence, where secrets bloomed into stories before dawn had even broken. And you, listening now, feel caught in the same net, leaning forward, hungry for the next outrageous twist, the next whispered confession, the next rumor etched into stone that refuses to fade. Because here in Rome, scandal was more enduring than marble, and gossip more thrilling than the blood spilled in the arena. The hush before disaster is always the sharpest, and tonight you can feel it in the marble atrium, where shadows stretch long across the mosaic floor, as if the gods themselves are leaning in to watch. A matron sits draped in silk, her bracelets clinking like nervous bells, and the gladiator she favors waits just a little too close, his broad shoulders outlined by torchlight. The air is thick with roasted meat and incense, but beneath it all lingers the sour tang of fear, because everyone knows these games of flirtation burn brightest right before they explode. You see her husband enter, stern-faced, his sandals clicking like a death knell, and for a breath, the room freezes. You can almost hear her heart racing, though she still smiles lazily, lifting her cup as though nothing is wrong. It's the perfect theater, and you catch yourself leaning forward because you know that one slip, one glance, one word too sweet, could unravel everything she has built. Stories like this appear everywhere if you know where to look. Eleanor Herman, in Sex with Kings, tells of queens who disguise their lovers as servants, only to be betrayed by a careless gesture. Rome's matrons had the same problem. Secrecy was fragile, and discovery could mean ruin. One tale recounts a patrician woman whose gladiator lover was caught leaving her villa at dawn. The punishment was swift, his body paraded through the streets as a warning. Historians still argue whether this story was fact or propaganda, but you can almost see the horror in the matron's eyes as the crowd jeered, her own reputation bleeding out alongside his. And yet women kept playing the game. The risk was the very thing that made it irresistible. A fringe tidbit makes you smirk even as the tension tightens. Some wealthy Romans supposedly bribed gatekeepers at amphitheaters to smuggle gladiators out after dark, hiding them under blankets and litters meant for groceries or flowers. Imagine the absurdity of a hulking fighter crouched under a heap of cabbages, holding his breath as the litter jostled through the streets, all for the promise of a few stolen kisses. You laugh, but you also feel the dread, because if anyone lifted that blanket, the scandal would crash louder than any gladiator's sword. The power dynamics here are slippery, and Foucault would whisper that every punishment only reinforced the game's structure. Women tested the boundaries not because they expected to win, but because each victory, however small, was a rebellion against the marble weight of patriarchy. Even exile, some argued, was better than boredom. So they took their chances, weaving danger into their silk sleeves, daring society to stop them. Peter Webb recounted how one matron supposedly staged a diversion, arranging for musicians to set fire to a tapestry during dinner so she could slip away with her gladiator into the chaos. Was it true? Historians shrug, but you can't help picturing the smoke, the shrieks, the flames licking the air while she vanished into a side chamber, her laughter muffled against his shoulder. It's almost cinematic, and you realize that half of Rome's legends live because someone wanted them to sound like theater. The punishments, when they came, were brutal. Husbands might send wives back to their families in disgrace, cut off their allowances, even arrange quiet poisonings if scandal threatened their careers. Gladiators fared worse, flogged, executed, or thrown to beasts in the arena as public spectacle. And yet, the cycle never stopped. For every woman shamed, another took her place. For every gladiator destroyed, another rose to attract the same dangerous attention. You shake your head because it feels less like history and more like addiction. The city itself hooked on risk. The matron before you lifts her cup again, her smile too calm, and the gladiator shifts his weight, pretending to adjust the torch. The husband narrows his eyes. You can feel the heat in the room, the air thick enough to choke on, and you know something must give. Will it end in laughter, another close escape? Or will this be the night when secrets splatter across the marble floor? You don't know, and that's why you can't look away, because Rome's real arena wasn't always in the Colosseum. Sometimes it was here, in candlelit rooms where glances cut deeper than swords, and a whisper could kill faster than steel. Long after the torches gutter out and the last gladiator's bones are dust, the stories linger, etched into stone and memory like perfume that refuses to fade. You walk through the ruins centuries later, weeds clawing at cracked marble, and still you hear echoes, laughter rising from mosaic dining rooms, whispers slipping along garden hedges, the soft plunk of ribbons falling into baskets of figs. Rome is gone, but its gossip survived, passed from lips to parchment, from parchment to song, from song to us tonight. What began as flirtation in a crowded amphitheater has swollen into legend, and you realize these women achieved something. Even emperors envied. They lived forever, not through marble statues, but through scandal too juicy to die. Historians still argue whether the tales were exaggerated, propaganda, or genuine fragments of passion. But even that uncertainty has become part of the myth, ensuring every retelling shimmers with both truth and imagination. Take, for instance, the graffiti in Pompeii, scratched by anonymous hands before ash sealed it away. Some declare love between matrons and gladiators by name, others joke cruelly. Yet all prove that these affairs mattered enough for ordinary people to carve them into eternity. Eleanor Herman once noted in Sex with Kings that the true legacy of such liaisons was not the passion itself, but the ripple effect it left: songs, stories, and the delicious knowledge that power could be bent by something as simple as desire. You trace those lines now with your fingers, feeling the grooves, and wonder whether the woman named still blushed each time she saw them. A quirky tidbit drifts to mind. Some ballads were supposedly sung for centuries after, bawdy tavern songs, about the lady and her lion tamer, echoing through medieval streets where nobody even remembered the original names. Imagine stumbling drunk through a market and humming a tune that once mocked a senator's wife, long after her villa had collapsed into ruin. The endurance of ridicule is almost comical, as if scandal itself had a longer lifespan than marble or bronze. You can't help but grin at the thought that Rome's matrons unwittingly composed history's first. Foucault would lean close and whisper that legacy itself is another form of power, that these women denied voices in politics still shaped cultural memory by simply being remembered. Their rebellions outlived their husbands' decrees, their reputations immortalized not in honorifics but in gossip, which in its own way may be the most democratic record of all. You see it clearly now. Emperors may have commanded armies, but it was the matrons and their gladiators who still keep us awake at night, centuries later, eyes wide as we lean into the past. Peter Webb mentions an old story of a matron whose lover's name was scratched onto amphorae, wine jars that circulated far from Rome, spreading the tale like wildfire across the provinces. You picture traders laughing as they poured wine, reading aloud the scandalous pairing, and realize that by then, it no longer mattered whether it was true. The legend itself had wings, and it soared farther than any of them could travel. As you let the images settle, the crowded baths, the perfumed ribbons, the ivy crowns, the secret gardens, you sense the weight of continuity. Every society finds its dangerous flirtations, its forbidden pairings that thrill precisely because they cross the line. Rome simply did it with more flair, gilding scandal with gold leaf until it gleamed. And you, sitting here with your eyes half closed, know you've walked alongside those women tonight, felt the brush of silk sleeves, smelled the sweat of gladiators, heard the laughter that danced just a breath ahead of ruin. And now, as our journey slows, let the frenzy soften. Picture the torches dimming, their flames sighing into embers, shadows stretching longer across marble floors. The noise of the crowd fades until only the whisper of wind through ruined arches remains, steady and calming. The women recline once more, no longer plotting, no longer daring, just drifting into the quiet hum of sleep, their jewels laid aside, their laughter swallowed by the night. Let your own breath fall into rhythm with that silence, long and gentle, like the hush of fountains at rest. For now the games are over, the scandals are soothed, and history tucks you in with a knowing smile. Close your eyes and let the last glow of Rome fade into dream, because some stories are best savored on the edge of sleep. End of script. Sweet dreams.